backyard pizza, a pizza bus, and the world's largest pizza box collection. This week, it's all about pizza in New York City.
Traveling the world to bring you delicious dishes, tasty beverages, and interesting experiences. This is the Destination Eat Drink Podcast on the Radio Misfits Podcast Network.
I'm Brent Peterson. Welcome to Destination Eat Drink, the travel podcast for foodies. Destination Eat Drink is where we try the world's great dishes. Here on the Destination Eat Drink podcast, on the Destination Eat Drink YouTube channel, and at destinationeatdrink.com. And this week, we're talking New York-style pizza. But first, if you haven't done so yet, rate and review the show on your podcast app. It helps other foodies find us. And if you want to support the show even more, consider a one-time or recurring contribution in any amount at buymeacoffee.com/destinationeatdrink. And thank you very, very much. Scott Wiener is the founder of Scott's Pizza Tours. Scott and his guides take hungry guests all over New York to try the best pizza the city has to offer. His website is scottspizzatours.com, and as you'll find out in this episode, New York pizza is so much more than the floppy slices you see on TV. Scott tells me about his ever-changing pizza bus tour, the debate about traditional versus innovative pizza, and we really get into what is authentic New York-style pizza and what is not authentic. Plus, Scott gives a bunch of great New York City restaurant recommendations. Okay, I'm starving, so let's eat.
Destination Eat Drink.
Scott Wiener from Scott's Pizza Tours. Welcome to Destination Eat Drink. Can't wait to start talking pizza with you.
I'm delighted to be here. Thanks for having me, Brent.
Before we get into the actual pizza itself, I was roaming around on the internet and I saw that you wrote a book called Viva la Pizza, Art of the Pizza Box. And somewhere it said you have the largest collection of pizza boxes in the world. Is that right?
That is 100% accurate.
Tell me about that.
You know, I started collecting pizza boxes when I launched my tour business. I launched the tour business in 2008. And it was like, I was just in this mode of just trying to understand everything I possibly could about pizza because I knew that I loved it. I knew some things about it more than most would know, history and science and other things. But one thing I didn't really wrap my brain around until I started looking into it more was the art and design and technology of pizza boxes. So once I caught wind of that, I started collecting interesting looking boxes. And, before I know it, I had a couple hundred. And then before I knew it, I had a book and a Guinness World Record. And now I have a storage unit with 2,000 pizza boxes in it.
2,000. Oh my God. I was going to ask you where you keep them all. You must have a big house, but you've got them in a storage unit.
Brent, I live in Brooklyn in an apartment. We don't have room for the stuff we own. You know what I mean?
Right.
Yeah, the storage unit is key.
How often are you adding to this collection?
It's weekly. Every week, somebody will either bring me a pizza box on a tour or they'll mail me a box or I'll be at a pizzeria and I'll snag a box. So it's constantly creating more boxes for the collection that I then have to go and catalog.
we're going to talk about pizza, but I want to just ask one more thing about the pizza boxes because I find it fascinating. I'm older than you are, and I remember back in the 70s when we got pizza in a pizza box. It was this thin cardboard, not much thicker than like resume paper. You would get it on. Now you've got a much thicker cardboard. It's probably corrugated on the inside and keeps the pizza hot. But these old pizza boxes, you would get the oil dripping through them. They wouldn't hold their shape very well, and they wouldn't keep the pizza very hot. Do you have any thoughts on this evolving technology of pizza boxes?
Yeah, what you're talking about are cardboard boxes. And the newer version is the corrugated box. So those cardboard or paperboard boxes, that single layer, they're the ones that are they're locked with tabs in the corners. Remember you used to have to take the tabs and slip them through a little slot,
right,
and then they catch. It's like a little paper hook. So those were the original pizza boxes, because those were essentially bakery boxes. And there's even stories of suit, like the dry cleaning boxes basically being used for pizza, like in the 30s and 40s.
That's what I thought. That's what it reminded me of. Like when you would get back in the day when my father would get his shirts dry cleaned, that was the consistency of the cardboard, is the cardboard that they would put to keep the shirts, straight or whatever. That was the kind of cardboard that you would use on these things, and didn't really do the job, right?
No, not really. Now you got me curious. Where did you grow up?
Chicago.
And the pizzas that you're talking about that you get in those boxes would be the thin, crisp.
Right.
Pizzas.
So I've talked about this on the podcast before. In Chicago, we grew up on what's called tavern style pizza. I didn't even have a Chicago deep dish pizza till I was a teenager. I started with that thin crust tavern style. That was the pizza that we ate regularly with my family.
Sure, yeah, and that's the exact kind of pizza that would have appeared in those boxes, because clearly a stuffed or a deep dish cannot be retained by that box.
No way. So, everyone loves pizza, but you're really, really into pizza, Scott. How did you first get into pizza? How did you fall in love with it and create this business and this life of a pizza-centric world?
Well, what's funny? I think everybody who loves pizza, which is, most people, we all get to it the same way, which is it's the celebration, it's the birthday party food, it's the Friday night food, it's everybody got an A on a test and your teacher brought in two pizzas and cut them into 100 slices each. I just
Right.
those were the moments. I think we all know of pizza as a celebratory food and a positive food, and not an exclusive food. It's not the kind of food that's only for special occasions, but it's a food that you always have at special occasions. And so I associated with all these, positive feelings. And I think when time came for me to figure out what I was going to do career-wise in life, I couldn't ignore this magnetic interest in pizza, because it's something that we all understand and we all love, and I love so deeply. And once you realize that there's a deeper story to the thing that everybody understands the essential language of, I just think it's so much more compelling and interesting to share with other people.
Because everyone loves pizza, right? And it's accessible. When you talk about food, sometimes you get into these conversations about elevated cuisine and Michelin-starred restaurants and fancy sauces and stuff like that. And pizza's none of those things, because everyone can, no matter what your dietary restrictions are, no matter what your preferences are, everyone can have pizza. There's vegan pizza, there's gluten-free pizza, and there's all these different kinds of pizzas. Now, you're in New York, and of course, your tours are focused in New York, and everyone's heard of New York-style pizza. But I'm wondering, how do you define it? Are there certain parameters that you put and you say, this is New York-style pizza and this is not?
Well, I have lots of thoughts about this concept of style, and I've written about it, and I give lectures about style of pizzas. And, the way that we tend to define style is usually not originally defined from within a place. It's usually defined from beyond the place. So, for instance, New York style, it was never a phrase that New Yorkers used. It was really a phrase that was used from beyond, in much in the same way that that Chicago or New Haven or Detroit, it's always, this is the thing that they do there. It's only recently is it something that's becoming self-defined, which is, this is what we do here. And it's there's something about it. It feels inauthentic sometimes for something to be so self-defined, which is why when you ask, how do I define New York style pizza? It's a moving target. And I think when most people hear that phrase, they think of, it's a movie about New York, a character's eating pizza, and it's always a giant slice hanging off the edge of a paper plate. Mm-hmm. They're eating it while they're walking. They're folding it in half. And so in that sense, New York style pizza is the slice. It's the pizza that you eat on the go because New Yorkers are always in a rush, which is true. And you're in and out of the place within 2 minutes if you want. Whereas the thing that you would think of as Chicago deep dish, for instance, is sort of the antithesis. It's you're here for 45 minutes just waiting.
At least.
You can't stand up while you're eating it. You can't pick it. Which is why so many people want to pit those two styles against each other in some weird way that there might be a battle and a victor. But it's just that they're opposite ways of enjoying similar components. So New York style, I think, is what that phrase really means is that portable, foldable, flexible, chewy yet crisp style. But I also think it's evolving because I've had people come on tours and they say, oh, well, obviously I want to get a dollar slice, which in New York is like a crappy version of the New York slice pizza. Mm-hmm. But in their minds, well, that's what New York is known for. It's these super cheap late night slices. So in some ways, the definition is not controlled by those of us here. It's usually controlled by the perception of people from beyond our borders.
Yeah, it's like in Chicago, we would always make the joke, no one eats deep dish pizza in Chicago unless someone visits from out of town.
Oh, and I love that, Brent, because Chicagoans, in my experience, might end up on a tour or just in conversation, and they will defend what people perceive to be Chicago style, the deep dish and stuff and all this, the thicker stuff, and they'll defend it and they'll say how it's better and it's the best and all this. And then at the end of the argument, they always say, well, we only eat it when tourists are visiting us anyway. So it's this funny thing of like, wait, you were just telling me all that. Now you're saying that you don't eat it?
Yeah.
Okay.
It's so true. So I feel like it's difficult to define New York style pizza as one thing. So maybe it would be useful to kind of talk about the different styles of New York pizza. In other words, what are people doing that is different and interesting in your mind, Scott, when you travel around New York?
Well, do you remember the first time you ever had pizza in New York?
Oh, man. See, I moved to the East Coast in 1990. And so I don't think I'd been to New York before that. So it would have been sometime around 30 years ago. And I can't say I remember the first time specifically, although I'm sure the first time I went to New York, I had a slice of New York pizza.
I'm sure you did, but it's funny because if you're saying, okay, you were here in the 90s, then I think this is kind of how these food definitions work and how this concept of tradition and authenticity and all this is that in the 90s, like that version of New York pizza is what today we think of as like, oh, well, that's the original classic kind of thing. Much in the same way that lots of Italian pasta dishes are very recent, but because they're 1 to 2 generations or 2 to 3 generations old, we think of them as being these ancient, hewn to the earth items. Mm-hmm. But the New York style of pizza pre-1950 was a different pizza altogether. It was the pizza that Neapolitan immigrants brought over in the late 1800s, early 1900s, and where they were used to making pizza in wood-fired ovens incredibly quickly, charred on the edge, but very soft and pliable and flexible. In trying to make that type of product using American ingredients and using not wood, but coal in New York City and using ovens that were designed to burn coal, it just immediately and automatically created a different style. And so the original pizza of New York was this drier, crusty, coal-fired pizza that you can still find in some parts of New York. And in Chicago, I mean, you have a place called Coal Fire, which does excellent coal-fired pizza. And that reference point is this original early half of the 20th century pizza. And that's what happens when you come from your place of origin, you bring the concept of a food, but you don't have, I mean, they were not wealthy people. They did not think, oh, well, obviously we have to import all of our ingredients to make it in an authentic way. Authenticity to them was personal. It wasn't product based. It's I am authentic, therefore what I make is authentic. And that's why all the articles and ads in the little Italian newspapers in the late 1800s for pizzerias in New York all claimed about how this is the taste of home. We are making pizza just like we did in Naples. And since everyone who's reading that was also from Naples, that's what rung true. And even though what they were eating was probably crispier, drier, it must have been different, they still saw it as being authentic, which is why it's so interesting that today we think of the term, on a tour, I'll hear somebody say, I want a real good, traditional, authentic New York pizza. And they're talking about the 1970s, 80s, 90s version, which is the version that happened after the Second World War. The gas-fueled oven, which bakes at a lower temperature than coal and then wood. The low-moisture mozzarella, which is different from the fresh mozzarella that you get in Neapolitan pizza.
Sure.
And more heavily seasoned sauces that are made with American tomatoes, because in the 1940s, we were not importing tomatoes from Italy during wartime.
No.
Which is when the American tomato industry expanded. And that's why what you and I think define as New York pizza is this second wave of pizza in New York, of pizza styles in New York.
So these guys are still around, some of these, I'm using air quotes here, traditional or authentic New York style pizza places, but there has to be a new wave of pizza makers coming through. I'm familiar with a few of them. Tell me about a couple of your favorites. Who's doing innovative new things in New York that you find particularly intriguing or fascinating?
Well, it seems like the common thread among that new wave of pizza makers that are doing something really great in New York right now, and really everywhere, is that they're taking a look at what we always thought was this traditional way of doing things. And, in New York, you must do X, Y, Z. And I make it this way because that's the way my father made it. And that's the way we're going to continue. And I'm never going to make a change because I don't want to ruin the traditional aspect and the history of this place. And this new wave is looking back at that and saying, well, why wouldn't I want to make changes? Why were they doing this thing the way that they taught me to do it when there's a better way to do it? And when I'm saying the word better, I just mean maybe more efficient, maybe a better way to coax flavor out of wheat flour. Because I think when you're cooking over generations, using the same methods and the same techniques, but ingredients change. If you decide to buy a different type of flour because it was 3 cents cheaper per bag, and that was 30 years ago, maybe you're still using that. And that's what's changed your product without you really admitting to it. So this new wave is looking at pizza not just as a recipe, but as a formula and as a bread. So when they're approaching pizza, they're not so concerned with, it's got to have a lot of cheese. They're more concerned with the base of the pizza, the dough that I'm making to bake into a crust. That is the most important ingredient. And so this kind of new wave of pizzerias that are popping up all over the country, not just New York, they're realizing that there are no rules, and the chemistry and the physics and the biology of baking are the only rules. And within those, you can actually do way more than you could just by saying, well, I've got to use this exact amount of yeast and a handful of salt and 1 bag of flour. It's, these places are approaching it like a bread. So they're using more water. They're making their dough slower.
Mm-hmm.
They're putting it together. They're not putting it in a mixer, all the ingredients, hitting the go button, going out for a smoke, and then coming back in 20 minutes to overmixed tough dough. They're treating the dough with respect.
I hope I can express this idea to you in a cognizant way, because I think a point that you're making is fascinating to me, and that's that innovation has always happened. People try to put into a box, well, we're going to do it exactly like it was done at this particular point in time, whenever that is. Choose whenever that point is, in the 1880s in Italy, in post-World War II in New York, or wherever it is, and they say that's the end point and that's where we're going to stop innovation, basically. But what they don't understand is that when that first margarita pizza was made, that was a huge innovation. And they continued to innovate over time. In fact, if you go to Naples today, they're still trying to innovate into new types of pizza. So while I love this idea of traditional pizza, and they've been making it the same way for generations, I also have a great deal of respect and love for these innovations that are coming that make things new and interesting and exciting.
Yeah, that's the best part about food is that it can change. And I 100% agree with the fact that any claim to authenticity refers to a specific time and a specific place. And if you get stuck with that, you have to really stay stuck with that and make that the brand. But if what you want to do is make a great product that's yours, it has to change. In fact, Brent, I think that the reason we even are talking about pizza today is because it's a food that can change. You said it before. You could be gluten-free, you can be vegan, you could anything. There's no way that you can't eat some form of pizza. And that's because of our definition of that word. You might be able to say that, oh, well, in 1890, the word pizza meant yeast leavened dough that gets flattened with hands and then topped and then baked in a wood-fired oven. But then maybe 50 years later, the wood-fired oven requirement kind of disappears because culturally we realize that, well, you maybe can't get access to inexpensive wood and build these ovens everywhere. And then 50 years after that, well, a gas-fired oven is acceptable now because most people look at that and call it a pizza, which means it's become accepted. So pizza's one of these foods which is allowed to evolve. And because it's able to evolve and we still use that word and it's generally accepted, that just because you throw pineapple on top of it, it cannot mean that the dish loses its identity. It could mean that it's an identity that maybe you don't like eating or that you think is somehow deeply gutturally wrong, but you can't change its identity by adding to it. And that's why it's the food that we're talking about today because it's changed. If it never changed, if it was the same today as it was in 1790, I don't think we would be eating it. I don't think it's not a thing that people would love today. And I think that's beautiful. I don't think that's a bad thing. I think it's beautiful.
Well said. At Scott's Pizza Tours, you do a Sunday New York City pizza bus. Tell me a little bit about that.
Yeah, the bus is super fun. That's the tour that we run every Sunday, only on Sundays. It's open to the public, so anybody can buy a ticket. We run it on a big yellow school bus, so it's like a field trip. And we'll take up to 32 people. And every Sunday, I change where we go. And I run every single one of those.
Oh, wow.
And I decide where we're going to go based on the group. So, as you come in, if you're a group of 6 people, and maybe you're in from Long Island, or maybe you're in from Texas or Portugal, who knows? I'll just ask you a few questions, try to get to know you, try to figure out, what's your scoop? You live in New York, you're visiting for a week, you've been here 10 days already. How many pizzerias have you been to? None? 12? Whatever. And then I figure out, okay, for today, here's what I think we need to do. And I factor in people come back for repeat tours. So I always factor in, okay, well, where did we go last time? Oh, that was 10 years ago? Okay, things changed over there. Maybe we'll revisit today. Or maybe somebody says, oh, my cousin here doesn't like pizza. And I really want her to understand why I love it. And then that factors into the mission. So super fun, but we change it every week. And we go to 4 places that each represent a different style. So we're never making it the battle of who does the New York slice better. It's more like understand what Sicilian pizza is. Let's understand what bar pizza is. Let's understand what Neapolitan is. And at the end of the tour, people aren't arguing over which one was better. They're kind of debating the merits and what they like from each and what would be their Frankenstein pizza. Oh, that style of sauce with that cheese. And that's the best part.
That's kind of amazing, Scott. I don't know. You have to imagine, I have spoken to a lot of places that do tours, that do food tours on this podcast. I've been doing it for over 5 years now. And I don't know that other than constructing a private tour, that I've heard of a tour that changes so much and is specifically done with the people who are attending it in mind. That is super cool, and I got to say, quite unique.
Well, we haven't been doing that from day one. It used to be that if I didn't have a tour planned a week in advance, I couldn't sleep. But it's just because of time and experience. That's how we're able to do it. In fact, when we do private tours, I have a team of other tour guides, and we all do the private tours that same way. We'll have a plan in mind, but we never tell people where we're going to go because we like to change it as we go. And sometimes if it's a small enough group, if it's 12 people, I don't have to make any plan. I can really wing it based on the moment. And it's not something I recommend for tour operators because it's tough. It requires just tons and tons of training. And that's why for me, I feel comfortable with it because I've been doing this professionally for, at this point, it's been 16 years. So I have relationships with pizzerias where it's not even just necessarily me calling and saying, can we come over in a half hour? Sometimes it's somebody calling me that morning and saying, hey, I'm going to be doing this funky, weird thing at this funky, weird location. If you want to stop by and bring the crew, I think you'd like it. And then we just, that changes things. I mean, this past Sunday, I had somebody who was on the tour and they said, yeah, you took us to someone's backyard. And I'm like, I remember that was 2011. We only went there 3 times, and it's a guy I met who built an oven in his backyard, made amazing sourdough pizza, and he was getting ready to open a restaurant, but he was practicing. And we went there as like the 3rd stop, out of 4 stops, the first stop, you get everybody to believe in you and trust the process. 2nd stop, you really like drive it home and solidify that trust. 3rd stop, you can do something weird. 4th stop is your recovery stop in case the weird thing doesn't work. And that's why like that 3rd stop that day, I remember we went to this guy's house. We walked into his backyard. People were concerned,
right? Because
they were like, where are you taking us? But I'm telling you, it's the most memorable thing. And now that guy has opened a restaurant. It just got an amazing write-up in the New York Times. And it's at the moment, it feels like a weird thing, but it's kind of what I want people to experience. I don't want people to experience total comfort. It's not a fancy coach bus. It's not a list that I send you in advance of where we're going to go. I don't tell you what borough we're going to go to. You can't sign up for the Brooklyn bus tour. You can't sign up to go to Queen. I want you to, when I say we're going to Staten Island, I want you to be like, where even is that? And then at the end of the tour, you've got a real, genuine experience and not just visiting some restaurants that you could go to with anybody.
Of course, you're never going to get that experience otherwise.
Yeah, and that's why like our guides, we're not just about ushering people to places. We're really there to explain what's happening. And so sometimes we'll go to a restaurant. Like last night, I took a group on a private tour to a restaurant that I've never taken a group to. And I've been there a few times, sussed it out, understood what I wanted to understand. And then during the tour, I'm learning a whole lot more. And it's probably my favorite type of stop is the one that's a little funky.
I love your phrase, funky weird. And as you're telling me that backyard story, I hope you'll indulge me for a moment and let me share one of my favorite backyard stories. Back in the day when we lived in Rhode Island, a friend of mine, Nick, who's actually a New York firefighter, he was getting ready to open a restaurant in Rhode Island, a pizza restaurant, and he had a portable brick oven pizza that he made, but he didn't have space. He didn't have a physical brick and mortar space yet. So what he used to do is drive around the beach area of southern Rhode Island with this brick oven pizza on the trailer. He would tweet out where he was going to be, and he'd fire it up, and people would just show up. And he would start making pies and just handing them out. And someone would come out of a nearby house with a bottle of wine and pass it around. And this is how I got to know him before he finally got to open his brick and mortar place, which is sadly closed now. But I love this. unique idea of going into somebody's backyard because, like I said, you're not going to find that anywhere else. I mean, you can't Google that. You can't look on Yelp. You can't find it anywhere on TripAdvisor. This is just something you got to know the guy. And luckily, I'm talking to the guy.
Yeah, and it's I love that whole driving around thing. It's like so beautiful because it really reminds you that not everything can be fully experienced by either looking on Instagram picture or even by visiting a place once. It's and that's the value of tour guides and of tour programs where it's somebody who's like really deeply invested in this thing. They're so absorbed with it. It's a big part of their life that's why that's a valued, trusted source for information. Because you're right, you can't Google, oh, when can I go to that weird pizza thing in the backyard? It's not even open to the public. It's just a thing that you have to have your ear to the right vibration.
Good. You're in New York, and New York is a celebrity rich environment. I'm just curious, you ever have a celebrity come on your tour, or you ever run into a celebrity in a pizza joint where you've been visiting?
I am the worst at recognizing people's faces.
Yeah, me too.
Like I'll see somebody and I'll be like, I think I know that person, or like, but then I won't even have the guts to say anything because if I'm wrong, I don't want to be weird. But people on my tours very frequently, especially if it's a walking tour in Manhattan, somebody will walk by us and then they'll all snicker and they'll be like, oh, that was so-and-so. And I have a weird reaction to that where I really just try to say, all right, well, let's just keep on going. Like I don't like to dwell on the celebrity thing. And then sometimes I've had people on tours who I didn't recognize. And then at the end of the tour, somebody will say, you do know that that's the actor from Twilight. I mean, that was something that happened. I don't even know who it is. I'd never seen any of that show or movies or whatever they are. But and then there are some people who have taken private tours, which I don't like to really talk about. When people do a private tour because that's their own private thing. But it's definitely something that we've had people who are known names come on a pizza tour because it's unique and it's fun. It's super different. It's a great experience. And a lot of those situations have been families, where somebody wants to do something real fun for their kids. And it's a great way to bond and do something interesting and different that you otherwise couldn't do.
Well, if Bruce Springsteen ever comes on one of your tours, just, send me a discreet photo. That's all I ask.
I feel like I do have like in my mind a short list of if we ever ran into this person or if they were ever, God forbid, on a tour, I would have a problem. And Bruce is on that list.
Have a problem? You mean you would fanboy out a little bit?
Yes. Yeah. And that's the issue is that when I've had tours in the past that they were booked a month in advance and I knew that it was some celebrity and where I would have to really calm myself down and be like, chill out. It's just a person. But some of those have been some of my worst tours because I've been so self-conscious to, don't make a reference to that TV show.
Right,
don't make a reference that, like I don't want this person to think that I'm making this pun for them. Because, sometimes we, in the way that we talk, we reference certain things and like, I just get self-conscious of that, and that's a problem.
So, Scott, the last thing I want to ask you about is definitely not pizza related. And I'm curious because, you must eat a lot of pizza, but on those rare occasions when you don't, where do you like to go to eat? Give us some of your favorite non-pizza dishes and maybe a place or two that you like to go, because my audience always loves hearing recommendations, and New York is such a vast place that narrowing it down is always really difficult.
It's so tough, but you're right. I mean, when I'm not eating pizza, because I am in New York and there's a lot of Italian food and I'm eating a lot of Italian food all over the place. So when I'm doing that, there's a place that's not far from where I live, but it's very deep into Brooklyn. So your listeners, if they want to go there, it's not like in Midtown Manhattan. It's a place called Michael's, and it's deep in Brooklyn, and it's this old school Italian restaurant. It's just, It's like a special occasion place. It's so good. But in the city for Italian, I love Arturo's, which happens to be a pizza place, but they also have, other Italian-American dishes. Emilio's Bellato is a great one on Houston Street. And then for non-Italian, oh my goodness. I love barbecue. Hometown Barbecue in Brooklyn is awesome. Just super, super good. There was a restaurant that I went to years ago, and I haven't been back, but I've been thinking about it. And it's a place in Greenpoint, Brooklyn called Oshimoko. It's a Oaxacan place. Oh, so good. I mean, there's just so many good places. And, because I dine out a lot I'm on a pizza tour, I find that I'm not very often going to restaurants. Like, we're cooking at home more. But, if there was like a special occasion, like, okay, let's go on our way to it would be one of those places probably.
Well, Scott Wiener from Scott's Pizza.
Oh, wait. Brent, I'm sorry.
No problem. Go.
There's a place called Astoria Seafood in Queens, in Astoria, Queens. It's like a fish market. And the way it works is you select your fish, you grab it from the counter, and then you bring it up to the front counter and you just say, oh, can you fry this one? Can you grill this one with garlic? And then you just sit at a table and they bring it to you. Oh, it's so good. Oh, in Chinatown. Oh, my goodness. Chinatown. Oh, there's this great dim sum place called House of Joy that I love. Oh, there's so many good places in Chinatown, in Manhattan, and in Flushing. Sorry, that's my final interruption, Brent. Sorry.
No, for a guy who says he doesn't eat out all that much, those are some great recommendations. So thank you so much for that. Well, Scott Wiener from Scott's Pizza Tours, it's been great talking to you about pizza in New York. You notice there that I didn't say New York style pizza because I think you've taken me off of that term now after this conversation, because it seems like we can't say it's one particular thing, New York style pizza. So thank you so much for being on the show. It's been enlightening, it's been entertaining, and it's been, most of all, a whole lot of fun talking to you today.
Well, thank you for having me. I really enjoyed the conversation, Brent. Thank you.
Great stuff from Scott of Scott's Pizza Tours. I like it. You can get in touch with Scott and book a tour at scottspizzatours.com. And you can bet I'm going to be on that bus the next time I'm in New York City. Well, that's it for this week. Next week, we're in Penang, Malaysia for a dish called CKT and a dish named for buckets of rice and curry. You won't want to miss that. Until then, DestinationEatDrink.com is open for business. I just published a new foodie travel guide. This one is for the city of Jerez in Spain. It's a great place to travel for sherry, traditional tabanco bars, and flamenco. You can see that at DestinationEatDrink.com. Click on Destinations and Spain. And speaking of Spain, I just posted a new video about the best bars in Seville. It's a lot of fun, and you can see it by clicking on the video tab at DestinationEatDrink.com or by going to my YouTube channel at Destination Eat Drink 946. Destination Eat Drink is distributed by the Radio Misfits Podcast Network and Ed Silla. Thanks, Ed. I'm Brent Peterson. I'll see you down the road.
Join us next week for another culinary adventure on Destination Eat Drink, a presentation of the Radio Misfits Podcast Network.